It's funny we were talking about this because I was planning to talk about it today. A few years ago, I was running. I had a plan to do a 5-mile run on the Schuylkill River Trail. And for no reason I can really discern, I tripped over my own feet and I fell really hard. I landed on my knee and the side of my head. And you know, if you fall a lot, you know that there's a lot of adrenaline, right? And so you don't really know how bad it is. And I got up and I kept running and I finished my run. And I'm wondering, as I say this to you, how that behavior sounds.
Pick it up and after you fall and keep running.
Yeah.
You would think that you would stop and assess the situation.
Right?
I do the same thing. I recently crashed on my bike and slid on my knees and just it was dramatic, but it was also very chill. I feel like when I fall, it's I know it's coming, so it's it feels almost like a performance of the event. I'm the event is coming now.
And here it is. Yeah, and now onward.
Totally. And I was listening to this disco track or something, and we were pumped up, so it kind of added to the adrenaline. And there's shock around it. Are you okay? And stuff. I'm fine. And just kept going. Yeah, so I feel that.
Thank you. Yeah, that is absolutely my vibe and my behavior. And I came home, and my partner was like, "Oh my God, why would you finish the run?" Which is sensical, right? But also, I come by it honestly. I'm probably, so do you. When I think about that kind of behavior from myself, and I've said before in this class that something that comes up for me a lot is ways that I might become perfect. A lot when I'm sitting, I'm from here I'm just gonna get awesome, or just perfecting. I think about, because I'm a really serious history nerd, and one of the things that I love is to read about the experiences of the English people who colonized, who colonized New England. And I actually printed it out because I love it. This is from one of the original colonists' diaries. He's, for the first time in this colonized land, and his diary says, "Starting tomorrow, I will carefully avoid vain and needless expenses, diligently observe the Sabbath, keep my mornings free for prayer, meditation, and reading, flee idleness and worldly business, and I will more often pray with my wife." And the fundamental fucking Americanness of that blows my mind. This is one of the first colonist bodies that's going to eventually turn into this situation, and already it's this okay, starting tomorrow, I'm gonna, and when I do, and I'm not gonna do this, and I am gonna do this, right? It's so deep in our heritage. Sarah Vowell, who's a historian, wrote a book about these people, and she noticed that when she read that list, it reminded her of one of my favorite books, The Great Gatsby, and how when Gatsby dies, they find his old notebook, and the first page of the notebook says, "From 5 to 6 a.m., practice elocution, poise, and general results. Quit smoking, wasting time. Read one improving book or magazine per week." Right? This is what we do. This onward, better, upward thing. If not our ancestral heritage, is our cultural heritage. And it's so ingrained. There's this national idea, cultural idea, that if we offer care, we're making room for evil, right? If I stop and look at my bloody knee and bandage it or whatever, I'm inviting laziness, sloth, right? I'm not gonna make my 5 miles. If I don't make my 5 miles, I'm not gonna make my 10 miles, right? If I stop and do care, I'm inviting myself to become like a burden. And I'm not proud of it, but I have those thoughts about myself and other people all the time, right? They're really national thoughts, right? Like if I give this person money, I will enable his alcoholism. If we build these harm reduction centers, then we're going to allow for evil. Like almost every time someone in our culture suggests care, we respond with fear that evil is on its way, and we do it to ourselves too. My therapy clients do this all the time. Well, what if you just took a nap? If I take a nap, then I'm going to, and then I'm going to, and I'm going, and it ends in the gutter, right? Like this care is really frightening to us. And even for, those of us who are like super enlightened and know better, it's still, for me anyway, that impulse, right? That like care is dangerous is definitely still here. And so in one of the key practices of insight meditation is this practice of care, of loving kindness, of compassion, including self-compassion. I find that most people have the most resistance comes at this point of the teaching, right? When we're gonna say, part of what we do is care, including care for self. This is the hardest one for people to meet. And I wanna be mindful of the fact that that makes sense. And also, when I think about it, when I think about myself and people I love, and the way that they believe that we believe if we cease to be productive and offer care, we're going to unleash a monster. It just makes me really sad. Especially because some of the most upstanding, spiritual, virtuous people I know, including myself, right? People, good people, right? Cling to these standards, right? Oh, I could never accept your money or help. I've got it. Or, well, I don't watch that kind of television, right? I don't follow that on Instagram. It's quite spiritually pure. Or at work, I would never let a student fail. I'm going to stay late until that student learns. I would never let a patient go uncared for. So even though my shift is over, I am going to stay here and sit with that patient. I would never let a person who is suffering go unhelped, and so I'm going to give and give and give. These standards that we cling to for ourselves for whatever reason that we do, almost always in a very invisible way, end up also being standards that we hold other people to. When I say, oh, I don't watch that, at some level I mean, and neither should you. And when I say, I always give, part of what I'm saying is, and those who don't give are less than me. And when I say, I would never behave that way at work, part of what I'm saying is people who behave that way at work should not. Whatever judgment we're leveling on ourselves, we are also, to some level, leveling that judgment on other people. And it creates, in my experience, distance and resentment. And there's no distance quite like the distance that puts me a little bit higher than you. Right? This space is a lonely space that I often kind of wedge myself into. And of course, like, we all have to decide what moral standards we have. But I think, for me anyway, it's good to be mindful about the impact of my standards on the way that I interact with other people. And where that loneliness and resentment creep in. Like, would I tell someone I love to get up and keep running? Hey, 3 more miles to go. And if that person said, no, I'm gonna sit here and rest, would I feel smugly superior? Maybe. I did. The ways that we don't care for ourselves are practices. We practice. When I got up and ran, I put a value that I didn't know I held into practice. And I catch myself putting that value into practice pretty often. Which is why I have such a tentative and hostile curiosity towards the practice of loving kindness. This practice goes against my instincts. I can feel it going against my instincts. So metta, which is the word for loving kindness, is a cultivation practice. You may have heard it before. It's when you offer compassion to yourself and to a benefactor, and to an unknown person, and then to an enemy. And we won't do all of the metta practice here, but it does feel really important to include it in our conversation about insight. As a cultivation practice, just like we practice naming, allowing, we can also practice the kind of response we want to have to ourselves. Right? Because we get distracted a million times, we get to practice allowing a million times. And many of us, and people have said in this class, right, when I get distracted, I practice judging. Distracted again. And the teacher who's most famous in the United States for metta, Sharon Salzberg, will often ask people who say that, why are you rehearsing that? Why are you rehearsing judgment? Why are you digging the pathway of judgment even deeper? And what pathway might you build instead? If you're going to get distracted a million times, if you're going to allow a million times, what response would you like to practice a million times? And the suggestion is that the response you practice is compassion. Oh, distracted again. There's me being human. Right? If you do it enough times, yeah, it's like any other training or practice. It builds a new response. It's an invitation to rehearse care, and not obligatory care, right? Reflexive care. So we're going to add one more step to the practice we've been doing. Watching the breath gently. When the distraction comes, noting it, naming it. And then when the sensation or the distraction or the thought comes, also being aware of the reaction. So if you catch yourself being like, I can't believe I just did 2 breaths and now I'm distracted again, notice that that is suffering. To judge yourself is suffering. To judge yourself repeatedly is repeated suffering. And so when you catch yourself causing suffering, or if suffering just arises, my back hurts sitting here, then the invitation is to care about the suffering. And for some people, a good way to do that is to just say, I care about the suffering, right? That's the no, right? So it's like sound, this sound, what's wrong with these kids? Don't they know people meditate in here? Oh, judging, suffering. Right? So that when you notice that something is causing you pain, then compassion comes up. For me, compassion is really somatic. That's why my hand flew here, because as soon as I feel sorry for myself or somebody else, I'm like, oh. Or when, part of me hurts, oh, I'll put my hand there to offer it. So if you guys are down, I'd like to practice all of those skills together in a guided meditation. Yeah. And then I'll bring you back with the bell. A couple of years ago, I was sitting on retreat, and it was like the third day, and I had been just having like awful, like fraught, anxious sits, and I had just like started to calm down and be all right. And I'm sitting, and I'm like, oh, relief. And then all of a sudden, this knee hurt so bad. Like it was overpowering how much it hurt. But I was in retreat mode, so I like recognized and allowed. And then I had this like overwhelming, I'm sad remembering it, like this overwhelming thought. You just kept running. And it was like my knee had been waiting years for me to pay enough attention that it could be really pissed that I had done that. And in the moment, I felt so sorry. I really did. I felt sorry to my knee. I was like, oh my God, you're right, I did. I just kept running on you when you were battered and bloody. And it made a difference, actually, in how I respond to things like that. It took a lot of practicing attention and practicing care for me to actually make a difference in my life. But most of the time I don't do that anymore. And I attribute that to the practice. Like I think that was the only thing that gave me enough space to overcome my terror of not reaching goals and being a burden. I'm really grateful for it. And I kind of want to acknowledge the part of that is, like with all practices, like anything you practice, you don't really get the benefit for a while, right? A lot of it is just sitting there caring about the suffering, caring about the suffering, caring about it. Like it's very rote, and it's not magical until it is. Which I think is important to hold in mind, right? It's not this immediate transformation. It was years of compassion for my own suffering before it was enough for me to be like, oh yeah, that was a shitty thing to do to myself.